In today's episode, we're joined by Brian Wood. Brian is an accomplished SEO leader known for his pivotal role in scaling SEO teams at major enterprise brands, from starting the SEO team at Wayfair to spearheading the SEO initiatives at Houzz. Under his guidance, the sites he managed have seen explosive growth, with SEO revenue increasing by hundreds of millions of dollars. Brian is a strategic thinker known for his analytical approach and building high-performance SEO teams. His work is not just about improving rankings, but also about creating meaningful user experience that drives retention and growth. Brian continues to influence the SEO and digital marketing landscape by posting thought-provoking content on social media. He aims to enhance his followers' understanding of SEO, while at the same time making them question the norm, or their understanding of how things have, quote, always been. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Digital Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Eli Adams. Today's episode is brought to you by fireusmarketing.com, where SEO solutions pave the way to digital excellence. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Hi, happy to be here.
Yeah, Brian, I'm really excited to have you here. I've been following you on LinkedIn for a little while, and in fact, when I say follow, I don't know that we were actually connected, but I saw your post pop up quite a bit, and the thought-provoking, like I said in the bio, the thought-provoking posts made me think, man, this guy has got something going, because I love how you question the norm. I love how you're constantly putting out, really strategic, thoughtful posts on LinkedIn that make people question, should we continue doing things the way that we always have in SEO? And so I appreciate that. You've been adding a lot of value, and because of that, I ended up following you. So whatever you're doing, keep doing. I think your follower count will continue to grow because it's just great content. So I'm real excited to have you here on the show today for sure.
Well, thanks a lot. I am excited to be here and get chatting.
Heck yeah. So let's just dive into it. So let's learn who Brian is. So where'd you grow up? What'd you want to be when you were little? Tell me about Brian on a personal level.
So I grew up in Minnesota, which is where I am now. I grew up in like very middle of the road, middle class family. I had a little bit of a Tom Sawyer-esque childhood. Spent a lot of time running through the woods, catching snakes and salamanders, and wading through the ponds, looking for turtles, and getting covered in leeches.
Oh my gosh.
And I think back then, I think I was determined that I wanted to be an animal scientist.
Okay.
I did not know what that meant. And then at some point I was like, well, like a veterinarian. I was like, oh, no, I wouldn't want to do that. Anything specific? No.
Yeah.
Yeah, moving forward, I mean, at the end of high school, I went post-secondary. So I went to college, got college credit and high school credit for the classes, but the state paid for it, so it was a good deal.
Yeah.
I did kind of everything. I took, creative writing and photography and ancient history and fencing, but also chemistry and physics and C++ programming. And at the end of my free ride period, where it's like graduated high school, I'm like, oh, now I'm going to have to pay to keep going. I was very determined that the point of college is to get a job. And everything I liked doing, I didn't think was a good career to go into. And everything I thought was a good career, I didn't like doing, or at least didn't like doing enough to do it every day. So I just decided, you know what, I'm going to take a break, figure out what I want to do. Ended up never going back. So I have an older brother and a younger sister. My older brother is a professor of comparative literature. My younger sister is a state wildlife vet. So I'm the only wood child who cannot be called doctor, and none of us are doctors. So I ended up getting into the tabletop gaming industry, which is a big geek, so that was a delightful place to be. I worked for a company called Fantasy Flight Games when it was quite small. Had a great time there. I was doing marketing. Really loved working in the field. Probably my favorite place I've ever worked. That said, not a lot of money there. As the company grew from making hundreds of thousands of dollars to making millions of dollars, I got like raise after raise after raise. And when I left, I was the director of sales and marketing, and I was making $25,000 a year.
Wow, big time.
It was grim. And yeah, I worked in like a variety of marketing and just random jobs, but one of them SEO came up as like, hey, how do we rank better?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started really get into that. This was early 2000s. It intrigued me very quickly. Like most SEOs, I think, I started like, oh, I'm going to make some websites and start experimenting and testing. One of the first ones I made a blog, which was all about playing a hunter in World of Warcraft called Warcraft Hunters Union. And that's, its peak grew to like 800,000 visits a month. I became a minor World of Warcraft celebrity.
Wow.
And, had like the game designers reach out to me. So it was like really cool. Although quickly learned, at least at the time, really hard to make money with the World of Warcraft blog.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of stuff that I learned about SEO. And like one of the main things I did in the blog was write about theory crafting, where we conduct experiments within the game to reverse engineer the mathematical formulas that the game uses to calculate outcomes. And so use that to determine like, oh, is this armor or that armor better for you? Well, here's how we can figure it out. And I think that process is shockingly applicable to SEO testing, and like trying to like come up with these test designs. Even A/B testing, I would talk to my father a lot, who was a physicist, about like, hey, how many times do I need to attack this thing to get a margin of error of blah? And he's like, oh, you're talking about confidence intervals, and let's sit down and talk about binomial distributions. And so that was surprisingly applicable the rest of my career.
Yeah.
I finally joined an SEO agency because at this point I was like super into SEO. It's so many questions. And I really thought that walking in the door at this digital marketing agency that had an SEO was one of the services they offered. I really thought I was going to go in and get all the answers finally. And I was very surprised to learn like nobody knew anything more than I did.
Yeah.
And even more so that like they didn't really do any testing. And it was really my first window into like the reality that the overwhelming majority of SEO agencies, independent SEOs, right, are just sort of reading a bunch of stuff, finding the easiest things to apply of those and applying those, and then writing a whole bunch of articles regurgitating the stuff that they read.
Right.
And so I was super interested in e-commerce at the time, and in spite of, or maybe because I didn't have any e-commerce clients. I had 22 clients when I was at the agency, which gives you an indication of the quality of SEO we did. And so I started a e-commerce store on the side to do a bunch of testing, which was Awesome Dice. And it sold Dungeons and Dragons dice, like RPG tabletop gaming dice.
Yeah.
Which was my cunning theory that it had to be something for which there was search volume and where the product is very small, so it could fit in my like room that I was renting in a house.
Yeah.
And something that was cheap enough that I could afford to get inventory. And so dice fit the bill perfectly. And so started Awesome Dice, did a lot of fun experiments there. So I moved on to I got the opportunity to work at Best Buy, which really got me hooked on enterprise SEO, like the world of difference when you have millions of pages and you have massive traffic, and when all of the sudden, because all the SEO I had done up to that point, like you're doing keyword research, there was like a threshold, like, well, anything over this, you're just never going to rank for. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's no cap. If it's relevant, we want to rank for it.
Yeah.
Working for Best Buy was like working in a Dilbert cartoon. Working on enterprise SEO was awesome. And then I eventually got the opportunity to join Wayfair and to sort of build Wayfair's SEO team from scratch. So this was in 2013 when Wayfair, which was originally like 200 little microsites, and they were just finishing merging those all into Wayfair.com.
Yeah.
And so I got to step in there and sort of build the SEO function from the ground up, which was fantastic. second best place to work after working for the gaming company with a bunch of gaming geeks, except I got paid at Wayfair. So that was, better in that way. But tons of fun there. Wayfair was, certainly at the time at least, like very well resourced, very aggressively growing, and surprisingly fast to like make decisions. I'm reasonably data driven. We were able to build out just like an amazing testing culture and function there, where eventually I had a policy that we would run any test that would let us learn something about how Google works, even if we knew there was no way it was applicable to Wayfair. But like, hey, well, use this giant site and platform to learn stuff, because it was also part of sort of developing that culture in the team of testing. So I was with Wayfair, IPO, became the leading share of voice for furniture decor. And around that time, end of 2018, I had my first kid, and I had moved up to Boston to run the SEO team at Wayfair. So we knew that our long-term plan was to come back to Minnesota, raise our kids in Minnesota. So left Wayfair, moved back to Minnesota. I was planning to take a year off. Then I got a call from Houzz, which was really intriguing, where Houzz had, at the time, they had lost 50% of their SEO traffic each year for the prior 3 years. So it was like just devastating. I was like, that is super interesting.
Yeah.
And so joined up with Houzz, who happily who let me work remote. I wasn't allowed to let anyone else work remote, but they let me work remote, and I just sort of flew down there once in a while. And I had the opportunity to get involved with enterprise outside of e-commerce, because most of Houzz is a directory, a photo platform. And so really was fun to go in, sort of build another SEO team and culture from the ground up, and tackle, like, again, some of these really interesting problems at really large scale. And then, eventually from there, I got a pitch to join Age of Learning, so one of the niggling things in my mind, which I think is okay, it's okay, but I think it's kind of true, is that SEO, and I would say marketing in general, is kind of a parasite on the system that adds no value to the world. We add massive value to companies, right? Marketing is, sometimes you don't even need product, you just need marketing. Marketing is hugely valuable to companies, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you buy your sofa from Wayfair or Walmart or Amazon or IKEA. Often they're the same sofa. It's just all those sofas cost just a tiny bit more because of a team of us marketers who have to be paid to get people to buy it. So like that was always kind of in the back of my head of like, this sucks. And there isn't like a lot of, like, I literally have spent time on LinkedIn looking for like SEO, nonprofit, SEO pro bono. And there isn't a lot, because most of like the nonprofits, like there's nothing for them to rank for other than their name. And so Age of Learning was interesting to me because super mission driven, about early childhood education. This real, like, it's filled with employees who desperately, passionately believe that getting kids to learn to read early and learn to count and basic math is critical to their success. And they have this great product, multiple products. The main one that people know about is ABC Mouse. The thing I love about them is they have all of these efficacy studies where they have like hired someone to conduct actual studies about, hey, is our product actually helping kids read better, helping them do better at school? And so I was like, this is maybe like a little sliver of opportunity to do SEO for maybe something that, rather than being a little bit of a drain on the world, gives like a little bit of benefit. And that's where I'm at.
having purpose is big for, your personal happiness level, but it also goes a long way in your job, right? I think a lot of companies tout that they have purpose, and I think they do. And like you said, marketing does have a lot of value for them, for the companies. And so that's good that they have purpose, but it's pretty cool that you have a unique opportunity where you can do what you love, what you've been doing, what you're good at, for a company that really adds a tremendous amount of value in the world. So I applaud you for taking that job and doing what you do there, for sure.
I don't want to come off as saying like marketing and SEO is just garbage people. Like I think it does add huge value to companies, and we all need to make money. And I do not think, I'm also hugely against this notion of, you should do what you're passionate about for your life. It's like, no, you should do what you're passionate about and you should make money. Those are two things you need to do in your life. Some small lucky people, right? The same thing fills both.
Yeah.
But, you should do a job. Don't do a job you despise. Find a job you like to do.
Yeah.
But that, if I had $50 billion, I wouldn't be doing SEO tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. I also find it interesting. You and I have a very similar background. From a small town, we used to go up in the mountains and find snakes and all sorts of things like that. And I mean, I remember, when I lived in this house, I was in first and second grade, and I remember going up with my older brothers, and we would kill rattlesnakes. Like, I can't even imagine letting my 6 and 7-year-old go up the mountain to kill snakes. But we always just had to watch out for the badgers. There were places where badgers were and other animals, mountain lions and stuff. So that was, looking back, that's kind of scary. But either way, my point is,
wait.
Go for it.
Just to be clear, going and messing with rattlesnakes is fine, but badgers, watch out.
Yeah, because rattlesnakes don't chase you. Badgers do. That was the problem, right? So rattlesnakes try to get away from you. Badgers, if they found you and they had young nearby, they would try to protect them. And so there were some lines where we had to be careful. But so I grew up in this small town and loved animals just like you, except for rattlesnakes. We had lots of animals. We, small little farm. We had goats and rabbits and, stuff like that growing up. And then kind of going the same path with college. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And none of this existed when I went to college either.
Yeah.
Probably same for you, right? And so
Yep.
I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went and got my associates. I went to get my bachelor's and then found, more money in different areas and ended up leaving before finishing that. I love the path of analytical things that you did that made you think through a lot of, I live my life through a lot of if this then that statements. And I always tell my wife, if I could use a control F or some spreadsheet formulas in real life, things would just be so much better. And that led to a lot of my A/B testing. After I built a bunch of websites on my own, learned SEO on my own, and then I worked in-house for an internet marketing school, and then I went to the agency life just like you, and I found myself feeling the same way, going into the agency feeling like I can't wait to learn how they do it, and they're going to have so many golden nuggets for me. And it was a great company, and I love the company. I met a lot of great people there, but it wasn't this dictionary of things that I didn't already know. And I felt a lot of times, because I had built 40 or 50 websites for myself and other people by this point. By the time I got to there, it seemed like the agency was just like a conveyor belt of do this, then this, then this, and there wasn't a lot of thought put into it. And so I feel like in my role, I ended up, I went from, working with a bunch of small clients to enterprise clients to being over the SEO product for the company. And I feel like that gave me the opportunity to sort of change that. We did a lot of testing and we did a lot of thoughtful procedures to figure out what worked and what didn't work. And then I went back to in-house. And so a lot of our path seems very similar in that regard. And how exciting that you got to work for some of these bigger enterprise companies like Best Buy and Wayfair. I've worked for really big companies, international companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, but I'm talking tens of thousands of pages versus hundreds of thousands of pages. So I'm excited to dig in on the tactical side and learn a little bit more about your strategy on how to improve SEO with those websites. Tell me what excites you now? What are you currently working on that excites you? You wake up in the morning, you're like, man, I can't wait to get to this project?
I think there's a couple. So one of them, I think probably the thing that I'm most interested in right now, and that I'm doing a bunch of testing on, is actually link building,
Nice.
where I was sort of thinking through like my history. Like I'm not an SEO that is really focused on off-page a ton, but I'm an SEO, so I've done off-page stuff.
Yeah.
I was thinking back through like my career and being like, holy cow, I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars buying links through agencies, digital PR firms. And I was thinking about this because I've observed it's been incredibly difficult for any of those places to get links that have a measurable benefit. And once upon a time they did. When I was working at the agency, I at one point got a budget to test it's a PBN, private blog network, which was an exciting thing back then. And we didn't do it on client sites. We had like fake sites that I built, and we were like, oh, we're going to test. And it was some magic. It was like, okay, I'm going to get, 50 links. Here's my anchor text distribution. Wintermere. Okay, page 1.
Yeah.
And so I saw what it looked like when links work, and now it's not that. And so this conclusion that I had come to through doing like lots and lots of digging into stuff from the past several years was that it seemed like the only links that counted were the links that were actually driving traffic. And I'm like, and Google could see that. I felt very clever because it was a lot was involved with sort of tracking this stuff down. Yeah. And so I wrote a big write-up on LinkedIn about this. And then only to find out like a few days before, like Rand Fishkin did a video where he was like, oh, and in the leak, it turns out that, the traffic of a page a link is on is a big factor with links. I'm like, oh, well, that's confirmation. But I feel like I should have known that a little bit earlier and with a little bit less effort. But what gets interesting about it is then I start looking at, once you take that mindset, right? And it's worth noting I tend to work in, right, tends to be enterprise sites, tends to be very authoritative sites. And for an authoritative site, I don't care if I get 1,000 links to my homepage. Not going to affect anything on my site. Like I need to get links to the page that needs to rank, which rules out most digital PR. Because digital PR is going to get you a link to the best and worst flaw in every state. So, but at first I was like, oh, well, there's no agency you can buy links from. This gets pretty tough. But I started digging into various pages and competitors, right? You always see like, oh, this place has this many links for the average DA of this. But if you strip that away and you're like, well, what links do they have from pages that the page that's linking to them actually gets any traffic? And suddenly it's incredibly few. Like, I think it's starting to look like, again, in my world of sites with high domain authority, because the way you flow that domain authority side within your site has a huge impact. Yeah. But so for these sites that have high domain authority and brand recognition, the actual number of links that matter, that are influencing rankings, are super small. And I'm like, that suddenly brings it into a world where you don't need a scalable link building strategy. You can literally, at that point, it's worthwhile, have a couple of people who are just sitting down and being like, okay, we're going to look at this page. What are sites that get traffic? And you have very bespoke strategies because, hey, if you only get 2 links, if those links drive traffic, that's probably going to have guaranteed to have more impact than 100 links from guest posts.
Yeah. So I would imagine that internal linking on an enterprise level is way more important than external linking.
Yes. Again, external links, like if I'm at Wayfair and I get a link to my sofas page that actually drives traffic without the page linking to it gets traffic. A handful of those can make a difference. But yeah, the internal linking hierarchy tends to be, way easier, but tends to be more impactful. The other thing that's worth noting, and I observed this going back quite a ways, this isn't new, but when you start ranking on the first page, certainly the top of the first page, it seems like links matter 0 all of a sudden, right? Because Google's like, I've seen what happens when people click on a link to your site for this query. I've seen how much people like it compared to people who click on other sites. So I don't care how many people link to you because I know for a fact how good your site is by the metrics Google measures. So there's also link building becomes a, well, where are there areas that we're just not on the map? Okay, well, maybe that's an area where it's worth thinking strategically about links. But if it's like, hey, some stuff is ranking, some stuff is, but in general, I'm ranking okay. It's about ranking higher, and links don't really seem to be part of the equation.
So when you go about link building for an enterprise type of a website, do you sort of treat each high-level category as its own site? So if that high-level category isn't ranking, you would maybe shoot some links to that and then disperse it internally with those links? Or how do you think about that?
Yeah. So generally, if I have high-level categories that aren't ranking, usually I want to start then with like the long tail of that category. I want to think a little bit about why they're not ranking if I have other things that are ranking.
Sure.
But generally what I found is it is more successful in general, exceptions to everything. In general, more successful to build up from the long tail. If I have a category that's doing well and I'm launching like brand new pages in that category, like I'm shooting for everything but top head keywords out of the gate. But if it's a category that's like, Google just doesn't seem to think that we're really relevant for widgets. Like, okay, well, maybe we need to start figuring out why. And we're going to, rather than go for widgets, we're going to go for like, red flying widgets. We're going to start there and prove to Google we have some relevance in something that's a little easier to get on the map for.
So then you also mentioned, I've had this thought for a long time. You also mentioned that, Google looks at those metrics. They know everything. Now, is that the case for websites? Larger enterprise websites usually don't have Google Analytics. They usually use a different type of analytics tool. So how much data do you think Google actually has if their analytics is not on the website? Do you still think they know? Or is that, okay.
So what we know for a fact right now, which we have long suspected, that Google was collecting Chrome and Android user data because it's also in like your terms of service.
Good call.
So we know for a fact now that all of that's from Google's antitrust trial with NetBoost and from the leaked API calls. We know for a fact that they're using this Chrome click data. We also know, interestingly, in like the 14,000 API calls from the Algo leak, nothing at all references Google Analytics, and Google has repeatedly said that Google Analytics has nothing to do with search. That data is unavailable to search. And I believe them on that one. I think they're collecting it from Chrome and Android. In theory, I also have this suspicion, which is probably has no merit, but the suspicion that one of the advantages of Google Fiber is in areas where there's Google Fiber, they can just get enough data about non-Chrome users to sort of estimate what the non-Chrome user usage might be.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that too. Well, since we're already talking about it, let's dig into the tactical side of things. I mean, we have a lot of stuff to talk about. I have a lot of questions there. So if I'm an enterprise client out there listening to this podcast, maybe I just started my in-house team, or I'm thinking about it. I think you and I have both gone through experiences where we've been hired as the first and had to build it out. So there's probably companies out there in that same situation. What advice would you have for those types of companies when it comes to enterprise SEO?
In terms of tactical?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so it is true that different types of enterprise sites, right, are very different in terms of like e-commerce versus a directory site. So in the tactics, a lot of the tactics for those are different. But like one of the things I think is super important is, which we talked about before, is your internal linking, your internal navigation, making sure you have a hierarchical navigation, making sure there's a crawl path to everything. And then also like making sure you don't have lots and lots of low value links. So in enterprise SEO, we're doing most things on a template level. We tend not to spend a lot of time optimizing an individual page, but instead we optimize like a template of pages. And like looking at those templates and being like, hey, how many links do I have here that are duplicate links or serve no value at all. And you can actually get meaningful, like actual ranking gains from reducing this link bloat that tends to grow, and particularly in header navigation and footers. Reducing those can get you kind of a nice benefit. Another thing, almost every enterprise site does tons of SEO split tests, right? If they have a competent SEO team, they're doing SEO split testing all the time, frequently doing like title tags, meta descriptions. Those are the super easy ones.
Yep.
And one of the things that I think is very important to do, which again confirmed with the algo leaks, is to pay attention not just to traffic and significance of traffic, but also like look at your time on site, look at your conversions, whatever they are. It's an enterprise site. Usually we have enough traffic and conversions that we can measure that in a split test because, right, so we know click-through rate is a factor. We've known this forever. Google's denied it. And we knew they were full of shit when they were denying it because it was so easy to prove. But we also know like pogo sticking and bouncing back is a negative factor that hurts you. And so it is very easy to, SEO test through A/B testing, SEO test yourself into like clickbaity titles and be like, if all you're looking at is traffic, you're like, hey, our traffic's going up. That is a win in the test. We're going to deploy it. But then, a whole bunch of people are like, well, this isn't what I was for. A good example of this, super annoying title tags where I started at Houzz that we worked our butts off trying to beat these. And it was like they had a product section of their site and the title tag was like the 15 best blah in 2024.
Yeah.
And it's like nothing on the page was trying to surface only the best. It was just these are our products. And by the way, there was like 36 products on the page, not 15. The number also bore no relevance to reality. But I'm like me clicking on that result, like I'm thinking I'm getting something curated. And so the odds that a bunch of those people, that a higher percentage of those people were bouncing and pogo sticking, which in the long term, and this is the frustrating thing because those click metrics, right, aren't changing your rankings in real time. It's creating this 13-month data window that gets updated every core update when like all the machine learning stuff reruns. Yeah. So you're like, hey, I did all these tests and I've been winning. 6 months later, an algo update happens and things go down. Oh, why could that be? I know it's not my titles because I tested those. So I think for an enterprise site, making sure that you're not just looking at traffic when you're doing those kind of tests, but making sure that the traffic you're getting is hopefully performing well.
That's smart. I know a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this as well. I go to Google Search Console and I'll see the click-through rate, and I'll see which ones get the highest impressions but need higher click-through rate, and I'll optimize those. But what you're saying is be careful with that, because if the page doesn't actually add the value and keep people on it, then the click-through rate doesn't matter and actually come back and hurt you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Literally get a higher click-through rate that'll cause you to get lower rankings. And the ranking drop is sufficiently disconnected from the action that it's hard to line them up. Also, here's a fun one for e-commerce or enterprise e-commerce. Probably doesn't matter if you're small. Delightful test we discovered at Wayfair was using aggregate review schema, right? So you can get the stars in your listing. So when a product comes up, it's like, oh, it's got this many stars. You can and you should choose not to write aggregate review schema on a product whose review average is 2 stars or lower. And so what we found is if it was 2 stars or lower, that would show up in the SERP and people just wouldn't click on it. If we didn't have it there, there wouldn't be any stars in the SERP. The people who did click on it usually wouldn't buy the product, but we have all of our customer also purchased carousel. Yeah. A lot of them would purchase one of those. And we actually found when we first applied the aggregate review schema, we actually lost that traffic. We're like, how is that possible? And then we discovered, oh, it's because of this. Now, part of that was also at the time, this was early Wayfair, our product rankings weren't great. And so now the products that tend to actually have really poor ratings, tend to be lower in the rankings, probably aren't getting indexed anyway. But
yeah, I think that's good advice for anybody who has an e-commerce website out there. You're probably different than someone like Amazon or Wayfair, so like a little bit smaller. But if you have a 2-star rating, there's probably something wrong with your product, and you should probably do something about it in the first place. But second of all, I love the innovative thinking, saying that like you do want that schema so that the stars show up in Google, because it does help click through. Unless you have bad ratings, then it's going to hurt you. So
and you're telling people like, hey, here's a crappy product. Do you want to see more?
yeah, right, yeah. What do you think are the most like critical technical aspects of SEO in any enterprise website?
So enterprise is the one world of SEO where crawl bandwidth matters.
Okay.
I hear a lot of people talk about crawl bandwidth with like medium or even large sites, and it really doesn't matter unless you're like really getting big. But yeah, when you have millions and tens of millions of pages, there becomes this trade-off of like, oh, I want to open up some new level of facets of filters. So this new whole template that's got 3 million pages in it, of which 300,000 are going to get indexed. And that's going to actually reduce crawling elsewhere, and maybe cause other pages that I care about more to drop out of the index. So paying attention to your crawl bandwidth and optimizing it, like just looking at your server logs, which are beasts on an enterprise site, but like getting a tool to just be like, hey, just give me the top, 500 URLs that are hit the most by Googlebot. Give me the ones that are the top 500 301 redirects, the top 500 404s, the top 500 302s. And then you almost always find out what the heck. You'll find things that should have canonicals. You'll find, like when I joined Houzz, found millions of empty pages that were just a side effect of, they never were supposed to exist. It was just the way something was coded, had a side effect of you could access this URL. Somehow Google found it and then just started testing variations and indexed millions of empty pages. And then that's, I think, my number 2 on the technical side is site hygiene starts to matter. It's interesting. So enterprise SEO can get away with stuff that would tank a smaller site because it's such a small percentage, like whatever it is, if it's a black hat tactic or just sloppy duplicate content all over, like all kinds of stuff they can get away with because they're so authoritative and the site is so large. But it's also really easy in enterprise sites to end up with these pockets of millions of duplicate pages because of canonicalization issues, or just random pages like, oh yeah, it turned, like I've seen something I saw often was pagination, that if you entered pagination longer than the pagination existed, it would still serve a 200 and just a blank page. But Google doesn't just crawl links in pagination. Google understands your pagination URL, like parameter formula. It just starts putting numbers in. And as long as you keep serving 200s, it's like, okay, you have a lot of empty pages. Oh, well, maybe your site sucks.
Right.
So I think on the technical side, paying attention to crawl bandwidth and just general hygiene, looking for these errors, is super important. And I think internal linking structure, again, becomes like an important technical SEO stuff. There's all of the, just basics. Every page should have a canonical. If you're in multiple countries, you should have your href lanes, and everything on the enterprise scale comes with its own whoopsies, and pitfalls. But I think, thinking about site hierarchy and crawl bandwidth and just site hygiene, just looking for the junk that happens, becomes much more important on an enterprise scale.
Yeah. So I love this. And I think that the two of us going back and forth on this, being in the industry for 15, 20 years, we have these conversations a lot with other SEOs, and it totally makes sense. What I want to make sure of is that some of the listeners who may not really understand the technical side of SEO, I want to make sure they understand some of these words you're using as well. And if maybe have you high level explain what they are, and then go to Google, search it, learn a little bit more if you're trying to do this for your website and you don't understand it. So at a high level, there's 2 or 3 words you said in there that I'd love for you to just sort of explain. So crawl bandwidth, let's start there.
Sure. So crawl bandwidth is refers to the number of pages Google is going to crawl on your site. And if you have, a medium site that's maybe in, the tens of thousands of pages, or a large site that's maybe hundreds of thousands of pages, well, Google's just going to crawl all your pages.
Mm-hmm.
When you start getting to enterprise scale sites that are, in the millions, tens of millions plus, Google, just because of the cost of paying for the bandwidth of visiting all your pages and downloading your pages and rendering them in the indexer, Google is trying to optimize which pages to visit and then how often to revisit each of your pages. And when you start to have too much junk, Google needs to start making decisions like, okay, well, I'm not going to visit all 300 million of these pages because be sure you don't actually have 300 million pages. So I think I'm going to visit 30 million. Well, I'm not going to visit 30 million different times because I know your homepage is important. I'm going to visit that, in an enterprise site, often your homepage is getting visited every 15 minutes or every hour or something.
Yep.
So there's actually only 20 million pages that are getting visited. And Google isn't bad at choosing which pages it should be crawling and indexing, but Google also isn't perfect. And so anytime, like in that which not a far-fetched scenario, if you have bad site hygiene, that there's 300 million possible URLs that Google has discovered that your site will serve a 200 server error, server code on, and it needs 30 million. Like, okay, well now the 270 million URLs that Google's going to choose not to serve, probably a bunch of those are ones that you wish it did, even if it's 99% correct.
Yeah. So the lesson is you need to structure your website in a way that Google is willing to crawl all of your website. So another word is crawl equity, right? If they get tired of crawling because you have links going here, here, and here, and it doesn't actually make sense, then they're just going to bounce and you're going to have half of your website that's not crawled very often. So structuring that website in a way that Google doesn't get tired when they're crawling all the way down and it makes sense for them is why you need to be important.
And also helping Google by telling Google what pages not to crawl, right?
Yeah.
Telling Google like, just no index this page, or blocking it in robots.txt is the easiest way. But then also serving 404s. Like, I know seems like everybody wants to 301 everything. It's like, no, this is a garbage page. Who cares? 404.
Yep. Yeah. And it's okay to have some 404s if it makes sense to have the 404. Yeah. If it has relevance, it's a page that's been around for a long time, has some authority, and you're replacing it with a better page, 301 it. That's fine. But if it's just junk and it was created because of the way the system created new products and it made 10 extra ones, just 404 it. Right? Okay. The next one you said again in just a second ago, but site hygiene.
Yeah, site hygiene is sort of a generic term that means looking for errors on your site. I'm mostly talking about like having URLs that shouldn't be indexed because it's an empty page. You never meant for that page to exist. It used to have something, but it's been taken down. Or duplicate pages, right? Which includes just going to a page with a parameter, like a tracking parameter. Having duplicate pages, having like a common thing that I've had to clean up a lot in enterprise sites is a URL can be visited both uppercase and lowercase, and that's 2 different URLs.
Yeah.
And so using canonical tags to get rid of that. So a lot of like getting rid of pages that Google shouldn't be crawling, again, through 404 in them, 301 in them, blocking them in robots, no indexing them. Although Google might still crawl it if it's no indexed. But there's also site hygiene is like, hey, let's try not to have 301 redirect chains. We're going to 301 to something, 301 to something, 301 to something. Let's try not to have just any number of errors. Let's not have broken links. Let's not have a link on our site that links to something that no longer exists.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like cleaning up all of like just the very, very basic stuff. And on enterprise sites, like, I had a blog for years and years and years. I had a handful of garbage pages floating around. But enterprise sites even with systems in place, like they still just accumulate in just piles of garbage in the corners everywhere.
That's great. Great explanation. The other two that I won't have you go into too far because another episode in this SEO series I did with Allison Wong on international SEO. She talked about canonical tags and hreflangs. And so if you're on YouTube, I'll put a link up here to that one. If you are listening, just go and look for the international SEO episode with Allison Wong. She explains canonical tags and hreflang really well. So thanks for digging into that. From a technical standpoint, there's a lot of stuff you've explained really well. How do you balance how much technical you do versus how much content optimization you do to get the maximum amount of visibility?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because you have to do both, and you have to do both as much as you can, and you don't have enough resources to do anything as much as you want, which I've actually come to believe isn't a bad thing. I think like if you have unlimited resources and you can do everything, you're probably doing a bunch of super low value stuff.
Yeah.
The less resources you have, the more high value the bar has to be. And there's a happy middle in there somewhere. One of the things that happens a lot in enterprise SEO, which I actually kind of disagree with and prefer to do differently. In enterprise SEO, we are very often go too heavy on the technical side, right? Because again, we're like, hey, I have 3 million products. Yeah, the products all have a product description, but who in the world is to start going in and like manually tweaking product descriptions? And so it's lots of template level changes. So it's like, oh, we're going to have the title tag be the name of the product. Ooh, no, we'll have it be the name of the product and the SKU. Oh no, we'll have it be the name of the product and the SKU and the manufacturer. And so like that's, in enterprise SEO sometimes gets too deep into that. And one of the things that I always like to do with my teams is take some stuff, some keywords, some pages that matter and be like, hey, let's see, just these 5 pages, let's see how good we can get them to rank. And like just manually go in and edit until we can get them to rank as good as we can. In fact, at Wayfair, we used to have contests. We would have contests where like everyone would get a keyword. Be like, here's a bunch of keywords. Everybody gets to pick a keyword. Whatever keyword isn't picked, I take. And then everybody has a month to see how high you can get that to rank on our site.
That's awesome.
Not allowed to sabotage, not allowed to do anything black hat. But otherwise, the door is open, and then whoever wins and gets a prize and whatever. And that sometimes, not often, but sometimes we would discover things that we could apply at scale at a template level. Because suddenly we're doing like keyword research on a page level, like just this page. We're looking at competitors of just this page. And we start looking at stuff differently. Whereas when you only look at the big picture and the template stuff, you kind of only think of technical solutions.
A lot of times with companies, like Wayfair and Best Buy, how much of your job is ranking from Google versus getting them to the homepage and then having them use the search to find what they're looking for? Is there a level of optimization for internal search just as much as external organic ranking?
On enterprise sites, it's always a separate team.
Oh, okay.
Right? So there will be a search team or a search and recommendations team, or search and sort team that's focused on the internal search. Usually, I'm going to say usually, not always. Usually, internal search is blocked with robots on most sites. That said, one of the things I did at Wayfair was like, hey, we should let Google crawl our internal search with very strong guardrails to like keep it from getting crazy. Because I think at the time it was something like 30% of people who bought something on Wayfair used internal search. Like it's perfectly valid for Google to see these pages. These are the pages customers are shopping at. And that ended up being just a massive, massive channel for us.
That's interesting. I didn't realize it was, I guess it makes sense with a big enough website, you'd have your own team. So that makes sense. What are best practices for managing and optimizing site speed for enterprise level websites?
So there's a lot of potential answers for this, but realistic one is like drown in despair. The getting any kind of optimization for site speed at an enterprise scale in a meaningful difference is so hard. There are always people in an enterprise company who care about speed. There are always speed optimization projects happening, but every PM who cares about conversion rate doesn't give a rat's ass about anything else. And all kinds of things are released that are like, it's marginal, whether that actually adds any value to the company. But you know what it does? It's some more code blocks. It's more API calls. Everything's slow in the site just a little bit. I am a firm believer that Google does not in any meaningful way count site speed in its algorithm. Semicolon, however, comma, I think that site speed influences a bunch of user metrics that Google does care about very much. The problem is the impact of those site speed changes tends to be like an S-shaped curve. It's like stair test. It's like your site gets slower, doesn't matter. It gets slower, doesn't matter. Gets slower. Oh, big problem. And so it's hard to say what the impact of a site speed change is, because any given change, unless it's the one that finally, pushes over the edge, that one looked terrible. But all the stuff that led up to it looks fine. One thing that I pushed for unsuccessfully, I recommended a lot of destructive tests. Generally, those were frowned upon. I was a big fan of running a test at Wayfair. I wanted to run a series of tests that would slow the site down in different places, like just deliberately inject delay. Oh, we're going to show you the header, but then stop for 5 seconds and 10 seconds and 15, or, what happens if we add 100 milliseconds or 500 milliseconds, and figure out where those stair steps are, so that we can then say, hey, on average, every millisecond costs us this much, this percentage of conversion. And now every time you build a feature, you can test it and say, here's the benefit. But then you can say, hey, that feature adds 37 milliseconds to the load. We know each millisecond is worth, $5,000, right? And count that your trade-off. But it's amazing how many times I suggested doing things that would harm the site's traffic or cost us money that people didn't want to do. It's bizarre.
Yeah, I can understand from an executive level, you wouldn't want to hurt or harm your revenue in any way, but I can also see from a strategic standpoint, the learning that you can get from that and understanding just how much it does harm or help. And so from a site speed standpoint, and some of the bigger companies I've worked for, I've found that anything that we put into their queue was never important enough to go into the sprint to actually get done and worked on anyway. So we had to work around it and find other ways and areas. It was very seldom that we could actually prove enough significant value without doing tests like this to say this is more important than what you're currently working on. So put that in the sprint. So, and I think a lot of bigger companies struggle with that balance between like the marketing compared to whatever development and product that is being built or optimized or whatever.
And to be fair, I often had destructive testing ideas because all I cared about was learning something. And so I think this particular one would have been worthwhile, but like when I was at Wayfair, we removed the site from Google for 3 hours.
Interesting.
And we did that to measure, we knew some amount of direct attributed traffic was actually organic traffic without a referrer. And so we're like, hey, let's test this. And to be fair, we first did this test on Awesome Dice. Awesome Dice did a lot of dangerous tests first for Wayfair. And then we did it on another Wayfair-owned site that wasn't very important, just to make sure we could get everything back in just a handful of hours with all the same rankings. And then, so we did it to sort of measure what would the impact be on direct traffic. In other words, what percentage of the direct traffic is actually SEO traffic that's not being attributed.
I love the fact that you had a testing ground too, and you didn't have to do it on your big site in the beginning. That's a great strategy. Okay, I have one more question from a tactical standpoint, and then I want to move on to where you see the future going. But what role does mobile optimization play in SEO strategies for these larger companies?
In terms of mobile site or mobile app?
Mobile site optimization.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything is mobile first at this point. I don't know where some exist, but I don't know of a single site right now that is not on the mobile index. So it's like mobile and desktop both matter. right, for these user metrics, these click metrics that are
Mhm.
influencing the algorithm. But in terms of like your basic on-page optimization and your link hierarchy, that's all mobile.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, perfect, man. That's I could talk to you all day. There's so many fun questions to go in and dive into, especially on the technical side. I had some questions on backlinks, but you addressed those in the beginning. From a future standpoint, where do you see the future of enterprise SEO going?
So I have a couple thoughts on this. One of which, because I get asked this question relatively often, and there's one answer that's been true my whole career, which
Okay.
is this. Google has always has worked to direct more searches to ads and to other
Mhm.
Google-owned pages, right? This has been like a long, consistent thing, whether it's adding more ads, making ads on more turns, whether it's deploying more like, oh, now it's Google Flight. And guess what? They're always at the top because I guess we earned the spot. And for a long time, the increase in number of searchers and the increase in number of searches each searcher made still let there be overall SEO traffic growth. And I think we've crossed a tipping point now where we're actually seeing Google directing less traffic out to the web than it used to. But that trend is going to continue. There's still going to be just crap tons of traffic and money in the SEO space. But a lot of people who haven't been in the SEO space very long feel the doom and gloom, like, oh my God, and
Yep.
everything is happening. Google's stealing the traffic. Google's always done that. And that Google's going to continue to do that unless some kind of crazy regulation comes down, which I doubt, or if another search engine comes and disrupts Google, and then they have to actually compete.
Yeah, for sure. Also, we know that their ad revenue's been down, and I think a lot of people assume, well, money's tight because of the economy. I think that could be part of it, but I also think that that consumers are smarter now than they've ever been, and I know a lot of people, especially in our industry, never click on the paid ads. They go down to the organic side, right? And so that could be another reason maybe people are more educated on that, and they know that the organic results are usually more likely going to deliver the answer that they want as opposed to the paid side. Now there's a bigger question with AI, and I'm curious to know what role you think AI is going to play in the future of SEO as well. But do you think I know a lot of people say SEO's finally dead. Like, I still don't think it is. I think it's going to see a hiccup for sure. But what role do you see AI playing in the future of SEO?
Yeah, so in the short term, AI is good and is going to be better at summarizing for you the first paragraph of Wikipedia.
Yeah.
So if you want, and once upon a time, this whole notion that Google has always tried to stop sending people out. Once upon a time, you could have a well-monetized website where every page of your website was like, how many teaspoons are in a tablespoon? How many cups are in a quart? Right? And then you get to the page, there'd be ads everywhere and your answer. And now Google just answers those. So I feel like if you need like, hey, what was the text of the Gettysburg Address? Or like, oh, what was the deal? What was George Washington's biggest battle? Right? AI, like LLMs, ChatGPT and stuff, are going to be good at answering that. And they're going to, as they get better, do a good job of sort of killing some of that like quick, basic answer informational searches, which I think was always a weak place to be in for content sites. I do worry about the impact that's going to have on Wikipedia, where a lot of those answers are coming from Wikipedia. Only now, Wikipedia is going to give the answers, and it's ChatGPT who's going to serve the answer. And so then people aren't going to be donating to Wikipedia. So there's like a potential. But so in the short term, these super basic informational searches are going to get impacted. I've talked to people who are on content teams at enterprise sites, sometimes even enterprise e-commerce sites that have a content team. And they've seen like a meaningful drop in their traffic despite their rankings not changing. And it is for the articles that are like, oh, what color is this? I don't know, what's the largest dog breed? These informational things. In the medium to long term, I don't think there's any danger of AIs replacing search. Like if it comes down to like, what product should I get, or what's the best flaw, or where do I do this, or find a hotel, the LLM model isn't going to solve that. In the long term, it's possible the way they'll solve it is by having their own or going to another search engine and making a search and having a way to tell you basically what the search results are. But at that point, your search engine optimization is still your search engine optimization. You're still trying to be one of the first X results. But like the basic LLM models are really, really bad at telling you, what's the best sneakers for jogging if you have wide feet, right? They're not good. That the results are bad, and I don't think the results are going to get better. So yeah, I think there's a possibility that AI is just going to use a search engine to give you results, but then your search engine optimization stays kind of what it is.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that search engine optimization always has its challenges and always has changes that have made things better, right? So like when the people also ask section came out on Google, people were like, nobody's ever going to go to my website. But now we're optimizing the website to show up in those results so that people actually click on it to get more information. And there's ways around it. And I think there's going to be ways to do search engine optimization to show up better in AI and potentially have one, it shows the answer and then it shows some links down low to potentially be one of those links at some point too. But it's ever evolving. I don't think SEO is dead. I think it's just changing for sure.
Yeah. And I think some of the core stuff, again, with the exception of these very simple answer things, that is an area that I think is threatened. One of the other things that I think is interesting now that makes me think a little bit about, trying to think about the direction Google's trying to go is Google, right, for a long time has been like, dear God, how do we not use links? This super easily manipulated signal. And it seems like something Google has really latched onto is we are going to find out what people like, where people go. And then we're going to tell people that's where you should go. Right. And so this is the reason Google seems to be favoring big brands, and these brand or high authority sites. It's because they're like, hey, I can see that a whole bunch of people who search for this, are actually searching for, Adidas running shoes. Okay. So running shoes, that's going to be Adidas. And it seems like over time, they're looking for more of these signals. And so, and this is crushing some small sites, like in the past several months, like it's just brutal, while really big, well-known brands are able to produce just garbage content, and rank for it. And I think, although they have been getting slapped down recently, but I think it's because of this philosophy of Google of like, the best signal we have is what users do. And so I think that means that demand generation at some point becomes a part of your SEO strategy of, hey, letting Google see that people are looking for you, letting Google see that people are coming to your site and visiting these pages who, not just from Google, that you're actually getting real people and real traffic engaging with the content on your site. I think that, particularly for larger sites who have better budgets to do that kind of thing, but I think that's going to increasingly become a part of an SEO strategy, is creating, right, that SEO, which once upon a time was the traffic channel to do when you had no money, right? But now increasingly SEO is going to become this traffic channel that you need to seed the pot before you're going to get the SEO traffic. You need to prove to Google that you're a site that people want to go to, which is sad because it does remove this delightful discovery. Like, I don't remember the last time I Googled something and found like a site I had never heard of that was just awesome. And like, oh my God, here's this guy who's been building birdhouses all his life. He has 180 birdhouse plans and photos and videos and 2 links. And that guy's never going to rank, even if it's the best content.
Yeah. Brian, I can tell you know your stuff, man. You're a wealth of knowledge. I can tell you've been in the industry a long time. You know the ins and outs of it. And I appreciate you taking the time to jump on and educate us from your many, many years of experience. At the end of every podcast, I ask 2 different questions. So the first one is if you could go back to your younger self and give advice, what would that be?
I think I would tell my younger self to take bigger swings. I think there was a time when I was like ambitious and, energetic and without children and half the time single. And I was very, very productive, but I was like I was aiming for here. I was like, I remember there was a point that I was like, if I can make a site that makes $100 a month, like on autopilot, maybe just twice a year, I go update it. If I have just like, I don't know, 12 of those sites, like I could just live off of that. That would be amazing. Like, yeah, I'm sitting there fantasizing about making $15,000 a year and retiring. And I think for a very similar effort, if I had taken bigger swings, I'd had more misses, but you don't need as many hits to get a better outcome. So yeah.
Take bigger swings. Solid advice. If you do you have any books, podcasts, or leaders that currently inspire you?
So I recently have been increasingly fond of Spark Toro. Occasionally does these office hours webinars. So Spark Toro is the company founded by Rand Fishkin, who was the founder of Moz. It's a really cool tool. But he, has been, since breaking the Algo League, he's been, talking about a lot of things that are like very interesting marketing things like zero-click marketing, but also lately a lot of SEO related stuff. But also I love the fact that I believe that Rand Fishkin genuinely himself believes that by being really helpful to people and just for free, here's really good, useful stuff, that's what's going to make him successful. And that's the right thing to do. And of course, he's also a very good speaker. But that like really makes it, even if it's something that's like a little outside of my wheelhouse, like, this is really SEO related, but it's this, but but what Rand says is always so tailored to try to be useful and practical. I find it really worth doing.
It always has too. Let me mention this one thing, and then you can keep going. From the beginning, following Rand, he's always had a way of speaking like to you. Like you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't think of it that way. Like he's a really good speaker. In fact, just a little side note, he's committed to be on the podcast in the fall. So I need to hold his feet to the fire and make sure he does that. So maybe I'll send him this little snippet, but he did say he's busy right now. I have his email address. We've been communicating. He said that he will be on the podcast in the fall, so I'm excited about that. But you were going to say one more thing you were going to say.
Oh, I was going to say the other thing on the book front, which I think is fun. There is this book that I liked a lot called Creativity Inc. So this is like a bio of Pixar written by the guys who founded Pixar. And then a lot of it's just like fun stories about how they created Pixar and how they like had to like manage Steve Jobs when he like bought Pixar and keep him out of the actual movie making side of things. But a couple things that I like is they talk about how to manage creative teams, which I think to me SEO counts as. Like SEO is like, I need my SEO teams to be thinking creatively, to be having ideas, to not just be, following the agency playbook. And so I think, kind of the advice on managing creative teams. And also I'm impressed with these guys because, right, they founded Pixar, which was cool, but a lot of people have founded successful company. But then they got bought by Disney. They got put in charge of Disney's animation studios. And like that, suddenly Disney was making big hit animated movies again, which they hadn't for like a decade. And so I was like, okay, there's something to what these guys say. They know something that is replicable.
Nice. Okay. How can people get in touch with you, Brian?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can just search for Brian Wood SEO. I'll probably come up. And that's probably the best way to ping me is send me a message on LinkedIn and connect with me if you had questions. I'm always happy to talk SEO. If you're selling links, just please God no, just don't.
Brian, I really appreciate you taking the time again to jump on the podcast and enlighten us with all of your knowledge. I'm excited to get this out. But again, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for having me.
You bet. And to everyone else listening, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much for listening to the episode today. Listen, I know how valuable an hour of your time can be, and for you to take that busy time out of your day and spend it with us, it really means a lot. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider liking and subscribing on whatever platform you're on. And don't forget to leave a comment. Tell us what you thought about the interview. Ask us questions. Let us know what other digital topics you'd like to hear about in the future. We're here to add value to your life and elevate your digital presence online. If you'd like some help doing that, reach out to me at fireusmarketing.com. See you on the next one.